I'm Caroline Hyde. This is the best of Bloomberg Technology, where we bring you all our top interviews from this week in tech. Coming up, Elon Musk is looking for money. He's out to raise over $1 billion to bring his more affordable Model 3 electric car to the market. Plus, Intel hits the ignition switch on its dream for the driverless car with a $15 billion acquisition. Details on how the deal to buy Mobileye went down. And another twist in the massive 2014 Yahoo hack. US officials blame Russian intelligence. First, to our lead. Elon Musk needs to raise at least $1.15 billion more to bring his more affordable Model 3 to market. His believers, along with investors who buy into the vision of Tesla, could hardly be happier. The Tesla shares rose off the news. CEO Elon Musk is personally participating by purchasing $25 million worth of common stock. The Tesla Model 3 is set to begin production in July, and it will start at about $35,000. Now, we caught up with the bullish analyst James Albertine of Consumer Edge Research and Bloomberg's David Welch for more.
Analysts are skeptical. Yesterday after this, we were still hearing that some think he's going to have to go back and get more money. One possible explanation is that it'll be a soft launch of the Model 3. In other words, later in the year, we won't see a lot of production of the car, so they won't be ramping up quite so rapidly, and they'll really be building production much more quickly next year, and that's when they would need to come back for more money, maybe early in 2018.
Let's get the analyst perspective. Jamie from Consumer Edge Research. Are you convinced that really $1.15 billion is enough? Because they are burning like mad. We just saw almost $1 billion in the fourth quarter alone.
Yeah, and by the way, thanks for having me. I don't think it's enough. I'm surprised it wasn't a bigger transaction. I mean, you sort of strike when the iron's hot, and there's a lot of very positive sentiment among the sort of investment community looking ahead to the Model 3 launch. The other guest here mentioned what his comment was very accurate. We are going to see a continued spend as the Model 3 progresses from sort of an initial soft launch well into 2018 as they try and sort of work their way over the longer term to 500,000 units a year overall. So, just surprised though that they didn't take this opportunity to raise more capital and put that risk off into the future to have to go back to the market for another secondary offering.
And so, David, there might be potentially a slightly larger than 1.15 billion tapped a little bit in the market. But what else do we think in terms of actually the money that Elon Musk himself is putting behind this deal? Because he's the number one stockholder in Tesla and he's committing a little bit more.
Sure, he's buying another $25 million worth of stock, which next to his total holding isn't a lot, but that's what Elon does. He borrows money, he secures it against his own shares in the company. He doesn't take a salary, so the money he borrows from his underwriters is essentially what he is kind of living on. And he continues to buy more shares, and he's got a lot of skin in the game, and investors like that. And I think that's something that they've always admired about him. He'll probably need to come back and get more money, though. I think that's sort of the consensus here, and I think investors are prepared for it. And maybe it is just a matter of waiting until the Model 3 cash needs really start to stretch out, and then they have to go back to the market again.
Nevertheless, Jamie, looking at your price target, it's pretty bullish. You think the price could rise yet further. Well, does this mean that there has to be a really smooth process of the Model 3 coming onto market? Or, have you factored in any other risk factors here?
Look, I think it has to be reasonably smooth. I don't know that, if it slips from the third quarter into the fourth quarter, that it's sort of game over. But I think, they've talked about now the back half of the year, not late 2017. So the implication is that there's going to be some production in the third quarter. Investors are polling suppliers right now. They're trying to make sure they're on pace to keep up and keep on track for that third quarter soft launch or otherwise. The risk factor is if they don't sort of hit that target, then I think that could be a negative catalyst. And clearly there's going to be more cash burn here, as there always is with a new product launch at any auto manufacturer. So I look at the quarterly results as another opportunity for bears to kind of sink in and say, look at all this cash going out the door. We don't know where it's going. It's more than we thought for the Model 3. And that's where I think you have to take a more balanced view. They're spending a lot of money on the Model 3, but they're also spending to expand service centers and infrastructure and expand globally. And quite frankly, 10 or 15% of what they're spending is on product projects and products that we haven't even heard about yet, as has been the case historically. So, yeah, I think there's probably more negative catalysts around the quarters and definitely around the Model 3 kind of hitting that third quarter target.
Another top story of the week, the US government indicted 4 people Wednesday for allegedly hacking Yahoo accounts for the Russian government. Justice Department officials charged 2 Russian intelligence agents and a pair of criminal hackers in a wide-ranging scheme that included the 2014 breach at Yahoo that affected 500 million users. Now, US officials explained the charges in a news conference on Wednesday.
The defendants targeted Yahoo accounts of Russian and U.S. government officials, including cybersecurity, diplomatic, and military personnel. They also targeted Russian journalists, numerous employees of other providers whose networks the conspirators sought to exploit, and employees of financial services and other commercial entities.
We spoke with Bloomberg News reporter Mike Riley, who covers cybersecurity for us.
There's a lot of things going on. This is sort of the Russia equivalent to what the indictments that the DOJ released in 2014 against the Chinese PLA hackers. It's really their effort to paint a picture of how Russian intelligence is cooperating with criminal hackers that help them sort of hide the intelligence gather operations, but also help them be much more effective than they might be on their own. It's also a devastating picture of what happened inside Yahoo. These guys got access to internal systems that allow them to basically create these encrypted cookies that go on the machines and therefore access any of the users' actual email accounts anytime they wanted over a period of years. Basically what the picture is they've indicted 2 FSB agents, so these are basically Russian spies, and 2 criminal hackers who they say were basically handled by the spies, given tasks, given missions, told to go and get information on particular people both inside Russia and outside Russia, and when they came back with information, they got paid for it.
I think what's fascinating here, Mike, is that of course, this is something that was spearheaded a while ago, probably by Obama when he was president. But now this has been followed through and completed by Donald Trump as president, someone who had been offering olive branches to Russia. Do we think that was a help or a hindrance here?
I mean, that's going to be, I think, the interesting question that plays out over the next several weeks or months. In fact, some people are saying that this was a little bit of a Chinese knot that the Obama administration left for the Trump White House. Basically, they had this case all teed up, but they didn't pull the trigger on it before they departed the White House and left it for Trump to make that decision. It would have been hard if think about it from a political point of view, if you're Trump not to pull the trigger on something like this, because it was really, the case was pretty well documented. But if you do, then there's a possibility that it upsets this sort of reset with Russia that you're trying to do. There's no doubt Putin is not going to hand over 2 of his spies to the U.S. government, and I doubt that people in the Kremlin are particularly happy that this is going on. So the question is, what is Trump going to do now with this effort to build a new kind of bridge to Russia?
Yeah, because it really does pull back the curtain, really, of what Russia has been doing in terms of using illegal, criminal hackers by their own spy institutions. Does it delve any more into perhaps some of the hacking that was laid at Russia's feet in the run-up to the election?
You know, the Department of Justice officials are saying that the cases are unrelated, but they are related in exactly the way that you suggest, which is the indictment is really detailed, and it does sort of pull back the curtain on Russia's entire cyber operations, especially one of the unique aspects, which is the way that they use cyber criminals in order to do things for the intelligence agencies. In one of the cases, one of the 2 hackers had been, there was evidence that had emerged that they were doing illegal acts in cyberspace, and the FSB, rather than picking them up and prosecuting them, used that kind of over their head to say, look, you either are going to go to jail or you're going to work for us, and they became a recruit that helped their operations on a global scale.
Now, this week, GoPro spiked after the company announced a second round of job cuts. Now, remember, GoPro already slashed its workforce by more than 200, or equivalent to 15% back in November. Now it's cutting another 270 positions. The move is meant to reduce costs. That's as Wall Street expresses skepticism that the action camera maker can return to growth. GoPro also said its forecast for first quarter revenue will land on the upper end of its guidance, between $190 and $210 million, and that it will make a profit this year, excluding certain items. Now, still to come, Intel's $15 billion car tech deal could be a boost for the Israeli tech scene. We'll explain why next. Plus, we'll speak with Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey on President Trump's continued push for a travel ban. This is Bloomberg. Now to Intel, spending $15 billion for a foothold in the self-driving car market. The US chip maker is buying Israeli company Mobileye, which makes chips for cameras and driver assistance features. Now, it's the second largest acquisition ever for Intel and the largest ever for an Israeli company. Shares of Mobileye surged on the news as Intel's offer represents more than a 30% premium to last Friday's closing price. As part of the deal, Intel will move its existing car tech operations to Israel and keep Mobileye's business in the home nation. Bloomberg editor-at-large Corey Johnson caught up with Intel CEO Brian Krzanich and asked him, about that decision and its associated cost savings.
We built about $175 million of synergies into this deal, which, as you said, is right. We're going to go and move our autonomous driving resources to Israel, where Mobileye is centered. And there's a lot of SG&A and some R&D that is overlapped between the two companies, and that'll bring those synergies to that $175 million over time.
There was a lot of options trading in the days before this deal was announced, and I should say purchase of calls, like expectations that the stock was going to go higher and really soon. And it seemed to be near record levels for Mobileye. Yes, there's some excitement about the stock, but nothing like this. And I wonder how long you've been working on this deal and if this concerns you at all.
So we've been working on this deal for a while, but we take a lot of care, both with our bankers that we work with and the PR teams, to really keep this quiet. And if you take a look, it's been pretty quiet from what we've seen relative to other deals that are out there. And so we were pretty comfortable with the level of secrecy we were able to keep the deal under until really like the last 12, 24 hours. And we took a look at what we were doing and what was going on in the market. It seemed like it was everything was pretty okay from that perspective.
Yeah. Lastly, we've expectations of changes in tax policy, repatriation, which can sometimes lead to a lot of M&A, could happen in technology. Is that one of the reasons that you wanted to get this deal done now, ahead of a time when other companies might have been able to repatriate and do more M&A and the price tags might go up?
No, we would never do M&A as a result of something like that. We're always going to target around technologies and doing the technologies at the right time relative to bringing those products to market. And that's purely what this was driven by. We started these discussions before the election to give you some clarity of just how long these take. And so that we had nothing to do with what the tax policies were. This was about getting these two technologies together to provide these solutions.
That was Intel CEO Brian Krzanich and our editor-at-large Corey Johnson. Now, Intel noted in the announcement that Mobileye's operations will stay where they are. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel tweeted earlier, "Congratulations, Mobileye, Israeli genius, Israeli pride." And while it's the biggest acquisition of an Israeli tech firm ever, it's not the first. Others include Apple buying PrimeSense, Google buying Waze, and Cisco buying NDS. Joining us now for more context on the Israeli tech scene are two venture capitalists. In New York, Lou Kerner, partner at Flight VC, and in Mountain View, Shuli Galili, co-founding partner at Up West Labs. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, both of you. And Lou, I wanted to get to you first because you're helping manage Israelis' syndicate on the angel list. You know it well. Just how big is the scene? Because you think the world hasn't quite grasped how big it could become.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think this kind of seminal book on Israel, Startup Nation, was written in 2009. So the story isn't new, but I fervently believe that the world still has no idea about the innovation and shareholder value creation that's going to come out of Israel in the coming years.
Give us some stats, because I know you've got some great ones in terms of just the sheer amount of IPOs per person.
Sure. Well, when the book was written in 2009, the book was written because based on any stat you looked at, whether it was the number of startups per capita, the number of exits, the number of IPOs per capita, Israel was crushing the rest of the world. Here in the U.S., on the NASDAQ, for instance, Israel leads all the other countries in the world on a per capita basis. It's more than 2 times the per capita number of IPOs on the NASDAQ versus Canada, and it's more than 100 times on a per capita basis the number of IPOs out of China. So again, what's happening in Israel is really quite amazing.
And Shuli, I mean, you founded the California-Israeli Chamber of Commerce. You're helping building bridges between Silicon Valley and Israel. I'm finding it fascinating that Intel, actually, it was this time last year, they got in on another Israeli company, Replay Technologies, for the 360-degree Super Bowl players. They've also got, one of the largest hirers in Israel. Just how much does Silicon Valley already know Israel?
So, first of all, yeah, we're based in Silicon Valley here at UpWest Labs and invested in over 60 companies in Israel. And it's no surprise, I think, that all eyes are on Israel from Silicon Valley, and it's been that way for about, more than 20 years. If you look at some of the leading companies that are based here out of Israel, whether it's Checkpoint or earlier SanDisk, companies that are innovating in both the hardware as well as the software space, then you see also that a lot of the local funds and investors are looking to Israel for innovation. So Waze has created a lot of waves in the last 4 years with its acquisition. And I think that, Mobileye is not a big surprise. In 2016 alone, almost $5 billion were invested into Israel, in capital. So there is a lot of infusion of capital, and there is a lot of interest in the innovation that is going into Israel today.
Where is it going, Lou, for example? NDS was a TV software company, Waze, of course, traffic mapping. What are the key areas of growth, do you think, for Israel?
Sure. Well, NDS was really a TV set-top company, but the majority of the value in NDS, which was a $5 billion acquisition, was in the cybersecurity, the encryption of NDS. And if you take a look at kind of the major areas where Israel is amazing at, obviously cybersecurity is one of the amazing areas. I think also there are a lot of areas that come out of what I describe as imaging. So it started with satellite imaging in the 50s, so the Israelis could see what their neighbors were up to. And now they have some of the greatest photo companies, the same technology. So there's an amazing company called Lightrix doing amazing stuff with photography. They're going to be the Adobe of photos. There are amazing companies in video, amazing companies in AR, VR. Snapchat just bought a company called Cymagen. And that same technology is in the autonomous car. The LiDAR technology out of Mobileye is that same technology.
And Shuli, it's interesting, we've been hearing about how active the IPO scene is from the stats of NASDAQ companies per person, and Israel really killing it there. But do they need more IPOs, mega IPOs to the size of $15 billion, like we've just seen this exit, to put it largely on the map? Because most of this seems to be M&A.
True. A lot of the great technologies today are being acquired. And I think that's, if you look at the Israeli ecosystem, the biggest question among investors outside of Israel and in Israel also is, can Israel produce massive companies? That's always the question on the mind. Can this scale? Can companies start but also scale globally in creating impact?
That was Shuli Galili of UpWest Labs and Luke Kerner of Flight VC. Meanwhile, Uber competitor Halo is coming to a full stop in London. Customers are now being encouraged to switch to ride-hailing app MyTaxi. Last July, Daimler bought a majority stake in Halo and announced plans to merge the company with MyTaxi. The Hamburg-based company has already moved more than 17,000 drivers who previously used the Halo system to the MyTaxi app and plans to start converting UK customers this week. Halo users in London have until the end of May to switch. Coming up, General Motors CEO Mary Barra joins us on Trump, emission standards and regulations facing the auto industry. This is Bloomberg. This week, Bill Maris has had another change of heart. After pulling the plug on a $230 million healthcare-orientated fund in December, the prominent venture capitalist and former CEO of Alphabet's venture investing arm will now proceed with a smaller fund of $100 million named Section 32. Now, Bloomberg's Emily Chang spoke with Maris back in December, where he explained why he scrapped the plans. Take a listen.
I did this crazy thing called changing my mind. It was it's wild, I know, but I did it. I left hundreds of millions of dollars behind, but I did it because I feel like there are a lot of venture funds right now in the Valley. Every couple days I see new announcements of new funds, and I felt like after 10 years in the business or close to it, there might be other ways to have a bigger impact.
Maris's new fund will have the same focus on biotech and healthcare startups and is expected to close later this month or early April. Now, President Trump was in Michigan Wednesday. He announced the White House will re-examine fuel economy standards set by Obama administration and signaled he was willing to cut automakers a break on the standards if they hire more workers in return. Now, Bloomberg's David Weston caught up with GM Chair and CEO Mary Barra in Ypsilanti, Michigan, near Ann Arbor, and asked, well, what she thought about the review.
What it really would happen is we'd be not able to give customers the choice that we give them today. I mean, they choose if they're going to buy an SUV or a small car or an electric vehicle. And we're full range, and we are continuing to invest in the Chevrolet Bolt EV, 238 miles. We've talked about that vehicle in the past. We're very proud of it, and it's doing well. The Chevrolet Volt in its second generation is doing well. So we're making the investments to have the right products, but at the end, it's consumer choice. And that's why I think it's so important. You and I have talked about it in the past, that there's more change happening right now in the industry than's happened in the last 50 years. When you look at this, legislation was done 5 years ago, before there was sharing, before we even were talking about autonomous the way we talk about it now. So to take a pause, be data-driven, and look at what are the right standards, how can we improve the environment, do it in the most effective way, I think makes all the sense. And it's what we all agreed to back in 2012.
That was GM Chair and CEO Mary Barra. Meantime, Uber drivers across the globe are fighting for benefits like overtime and paid time off. And the question keeps arising, do the drivers actually work for the ride-hailing app? That's being debated in courts from LA to London. Bloomberg's Caitlin Meehan reports.
Are Uber drivers contractors or full-time employees? That's the battle Uber's facing in courts all around the world as it aims to keep its drivers classified as contractors. Why? Let's break down the two sides. Uber claims it's not an employer. It's just a platform that connects drivers to customers. In a blog post last year, Uber CEO Travis Kalanick said Uber drivers value their independence as contractors. As such, Uber's not responsible for paying drivers minimum wage, providing insurance, or holiday pay. But critics say many drivers work more than 40 hours a week and therefore should be entitled to these benefits. Authorities across the globe have taken different stances on the matter. In Europe on Wednesday, a Paris tribunal dismissed a request for Uber to make Social Security payments to drivers. This after the UK ruled drivers should get minimum wage and holiday pay. In the U.S., Uber and its rival Lyft are arguing in courts from Seattle to L.A. that drivers are contractors, preventing drivers from unionizing and collecting benefits like overtime pay. In a statement, Lyft told Bloomberg News that its drivers are independent contractors, and federal law unequivocally prohibits independent contractors from collective bargaining. Under current Seattle law, Uber and Lyft would have to provide driver names to the union beginning April 3rd.
Still ahead, President Trump's Take-Two travel ban was blocked once again by the courts this week. We'll speak with Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey ahead. And a reminder that all episodes of Bloomberg Technology are now live streaming on Twitter. Check us out. It's at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays at 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to the best of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde. Now, this week we saw a rebuttal of round 2 of President Trump's proposed travel ban. On Wednesday evening, a federal judge in Hawaii halted Trump's revised travel ban hours before it was scheduled to take effect, dealing him a major setback on one of his top policy initiatives. A Maryland judge followed suit hours later. Now, we caught up with Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey on Wednesday ahead of those rulings for an exclusive interview from Boston.
It is what it has always been, which is a Muslim ban. And more than being unconstitutional and discriminatory, what this also is something that is causing a tremendous amount of uncertainty and creating real harm for our businesses, for our research institutions, for our colleges and universities, and for major tech companies across this land. And that's one of the reasons why when we filed suit weeks ago and we renewed our lawsuit earlier this week, joining with Hawaii and Washington State, New York and others, we had standing alongside us leaders from the tech community and from business to say this is wrong and this order has got to go.
You mentioned, of course, that you say it's still discriminatory, but a lot of that thesis is based on past statements from the election campaign made by Donald Trump. How do you distinguish between what was said in the past and indeed the current writing in the executive order?
Well, he still has created a serious issue in denying visas and creating uncertainty about whether or not visas will be renewed. Let me tell you what this means in real terms. We have tech companies here in Massachusetts who are employing employees that have visas. They don't know whether their visas are going to be renewed. We have students at major research institutions like MIT and the Broad Institute who don't know whether they're going to be able to stay on and continue their research, continue their fellowships. We have serious issues not only about, with this order, not only about who's going to be allowed into this country. This order creates problems for those who are already in this country, working, creating to a vibrant tech community and industry in particular. Those interests are at risk. It's why I've spoken with so many business leaders and leaders in tech and leaders in research who said this order is bad for us. It needs to go.
I mean, it's fascinating. Of course, Boston is such a thriving tech hub, biotech hub as well. You talk of course, Harvard, MIT. You've got such an area of growth in terms of the tech needed there and the talent needed there. What are the businesses that you're speaking to saying they're going to have to do if it does indeed still stand? Do you know what the alternatives will be?
Well, they're standing right alongside us in challenging this discriminatory travel ban. Not only is it unconstitutional, but it makes no sense, and it hurts our businesses and our research institution. I'll give you examples. In speaking with heads of our major hospital institutions and research institutions, they right now don't know if they can go ahead and bring over the research fellows that have been hired, the professors that have been hired who want to come and do scholarship here. They have people who currently work for them as researchers and as professors who they don't know if they can continue to keep on because they don't know whether or not they're going to be allowed to fulfill contractual obligations given the president's order. So this creates all sorts of havoc. Tech and life sciences, biotech, they are the driving force in Massachusetts and our economy. They're also a driving force in other regions of the country. You're just talking about Silicon Valley. This hurts. This has an economic impact, and it's why you've seen not only states come forward and challenge what the president has done, you've also seen major businesses and major industries come forward and say, this is wrong. Not only is it not American and consistent with who we are as a nation. You think about the amazing companies that have been built, literally built by immigrants. It's also really counterproductive and harmful to our business interests.
But is it unconstitutional?
Absolutely. I think our arguments are well made. I think that they've been heard in multiple courts today. I'm glad that we will soon see, it appears, a decision from the Hawaii District Court. Other cases are ongoing, and we're just going to continue to press ahead and fight this right to the end because it is unconstitutional.
I am going to ask you again because I know we mentioned about what happens but if the legal challenge doesn't work, have you got any ways in which you think that you can legally bypass this executive order?
Well, unfortunately, immigration issues and the control of people coming into and out of our country is really something that is controlled at the federal level, and it's why we're challenging to say the right thing needs to happen here. No federal determination, no policy, no president is above the law. And so we really are looking to the courts now to uphold the rule of law, to uphold the Constitution. We'll await the court's decision, but stand at the ready to stand up for residents, to stand up for businesses, to stand up for industry here in our states and across this country. But make no mistake about it, President Trump has issued a second order. It's as faulty as the first order. Yes, he changed some provisions. He took some things out. He took a country out. It doesn't change the fundamental flaws with this order, which is that essentially it is discrimination based on religion, based on national origin, and more than that, as you already know, national security experts have discredited this to say this isn't what you're looking for if you want to deal with issues of terrorism.
That was Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey. Meantime, President Trump has tweeted out that he may have been wiretapped prior to the election. In addition, the House Intelligence Committee has asked the Justice Department for any wiretapping evidence by this coming Monday. Bloomberg's David Gura spoke with former CIA Director Michael Hayden and asked, well, how confident he is that any evidence will actually come to light.
I'm confident we'll know by Monday of next week that there isn't any evidence. My instincts are really, really powerful on this, David. I know how this works. I know how you get a FISA. I know how the U.S. government gets the authority to listen in on the phone calls of a U.S. person. And none of those things are suggested by what the president tweeted out about 10 days ago. It just doesn't happen that way. The president hasn't had the authority to order such a thing for about 40 years. You got to go to a court, and there's no evidence that that's happened because the guys who would have gone to the court, Jim Comey and Jim Clapper, have said directly and indirectly they didn't do that.
If it didn't happen, if there's no evidence that that happened, what should the consequences be as you see it for the president? Yes, but also what's the consequence of making that allegation on the intelligence community?
Yeah, so we've already suffered a lot of damage because the intelligence community already knows that it's not true because this is what they do for a living. And so it's just one more kind of log on that fire that seems to have been building, confrontation between the new administration and the intelligence community. And David, there's probably sin on both sides here. So I would just suggest as a member of the old community, but also as a concerned citizen, everyone take a deep breath and back away from this because the president needs the intelligence community, and the intelligence community knows their only purpose in life is to help him succeed.
So there's this cache of information that WikiLeaks says is hacking data, hacking information from the CIA. What recourse does this administration have against WikiLeaks? They're increasingly in a problematic position.
They really are, and I think WikiLeaks has proven themselves to be an enemy of the United States of America, and by that my definition is they are doing things whose only purpose can be to harm America, America's friends, and the way America keeps itself and its friends safe. If there were good answers, David, in order to shut this thing down, we would have exercised those answers already. I think we just keep plugging away. You know, one thought I had, and I really can't claim that I've explored it, have we exacted any consequences on Ecuador for giving Julian Assange sanctuary in the Ecuadorian embassy in London? You know, we are not required to make life as comfortable as possible for the Ecuadorian government.
Just a last question here. We're expecting an executive order on cybersecurity from the White House. That was expected but delayed a little while back. If you were to talk to the White House, what would you say would be priority one when it comes to cybersecurity?
Yeah, David, I've actually seen some drafts of that order, and I actually think it's quite good. It puts tasking out into the federal bureaucracy with fairly short timelines to come back and tell me how you're going to do these things. If you're looking for kind of the philosopher's zone, the secret sauce, I think the key to this is that our success or failure in cybersecurity is going to be more dependent on the success of American private industry and the private sector than anything that the U.S. government is able to do on itself. So I would counsel the president, Think of things that unleash, liberate, get out of the way of the private sector doing things only the private sector can do when it comes to cybersecurity.
That was Bloomberg's David Gura speaking with a former CIA director, Michael Hayden. Coming up, our exclusive conversation with Khosla Ventures founder Vinod Khosla, along with Bipul Sinha, CEO and co-founder of Rubrik. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio, why don't you? You can now listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the US on Sirius XM. This is Bloomberg. A story we're watching. Germany is threatening to fine social networks like Facebook more than $50 million if they fail to give users the option to complain about hate speech or fake news. The punishment would also apply if the company refused to remove illegal content. Now, the first draft of the legislation was presented Tuesday. If passed, it would be the steepest penalty Facebook faces in any country where it operates. The move comes as Germany prepares for its September election, and Chancellor Angela Merkel's government is under pressure to curb the spread of fake news. Now, will 2017 be a big year for tech IPOs? We've already seen Snap's volatile debut, then MuleSoft followed this week. And we're still waiting on a few other companies to go public in the months ahead. We spoke exclusively with Vinod Khosla, founder of Khosla Ventures, and Bipul Sinha, partner at Lightspeed Ventures and Rubrik CEO. And I asked if now is the time to go public. Now, Lightspeed Ventures was the first institution to financially back Snap, and Khosla Ventures is investor in Okta. Take a listen.
What we are seeing is that high-quality companies with a real business model and sustainability or path to profitability and long-term sustainability are the companies that are going public. Not every company is going public. So it feels like the bar still is high, but we have a number of companies with that high-quality revenues, earnings, differentiated product that are getting into the marketplace.
And so when you have your viewpoint on as chief executive as Rubrik, looking at all these enterprise companies that have followed on from Snap, which was a consumer-based company, now it's the time of enterprise. Is it time for Rubrik to start looking at the public markets? What really drives the sentiment there?
We are probably 2 years away from the public market, but we are building a company to become a public company and long-term sustainable business. I think fundamentals of enterprise business and selling into larger part or larger end of the market and deriving six-figure, seven-figure, eight-figure deals is what drives the enterprise business. So we are at Rubrik focused on like Fortune 500, Global 2000 companies where they have real needs around cloud, around data orchestration, data management, data security, and where Rubrik plays.
But when you're looking at your portfolio companies, I mean, we see some really big juggernauts that already have a proven business model, already are bringing in revenues, already international. You just have to think of Uber and Airbnb, Dropbox. What needs to happen? Do these companies need to come to the market? Do you think it's up to the investor base, the VCs, to say the time is now, or do you quite like companies remaining private?
The choice of whether a company stays private or goes public is entirely in entrepreneurs. Okay. There's a lot more flexibility as a private company to do some things. When you get to the public markets, you need to be predictable. You need to set out long-term goals. Entrepreneurial companies like Rubrik change strategy continuously, iterate, adjust. They're a very young company. It's only 3 years old. And so you want that flexibility to change. And with private investors, it's much easier to do. When you get to a highly predictable stage, then the entrepreneur can choose to go public or not. We always support the entrepreneur in their choice.
So you never apply any pressure?
Almost never, really. It's the wrong thing to do, apply pressure.
But you don't need exits. You don't need to give money back to the LPs. You must have your own needs.
You know, I'm proud of the fact that we never worry about exits. They happen when they happen. They happen often enough, but we almost never worry about it. In fact, I have a rule: if somebody talks about exits when we are investing, we won't invest in a company that talks about exits.
Fascinating.
It's the wrong approach to building really durable, large companies, thinking about exits. I'd much rather have somebody like Bipul or Nutanix trying to build really large companies over the long haul. And whether you get liquidity in a year or in 4 years, it almost doesn't matter if you're building real value.
You were saying before, Vinod, that you are an optimist, and we have cloud as a driver, we have data as a driver. I want to know about some of the environments in which we work within Silicon Valley right now, though, and whether they help foster optimism or not, particularly when it comes to the new administration and when it comes to perhaps the second iteration of the travel ban. I sit here with two Indian gentlemen. I'm a Brit as well, but do you worry about perhaps the limitations to some of the immigration US will see?
I do worry about it. If people like Bipul can't start a company here, they'll move operations to India. We're starting to see more and more people talking about building outside because if they can't acquire the talent here. For educated talent, there's global competition. Canada is dying to get more of this talent. You know, just the National Foundation for American Policy just issued a little thing, said 83% of the finalists in Intel Science Talent Competition were born to immigrant parents. Think about it, 83%. Immigrants, especially the well-educated ones, really, and frankly, all immigrants renew a country. And countries that have gone into stasis like Japan did so because they were so insular. So I actually believe it's a huge advantage. It's been the source of growth in America and the growth of vibrancy.
But Bipul, you're a man growing, obviously, the headquarters in Silicon Valley, but you're also growing internationally. Is this something that worries you? How has it affected your business here, or do you look to perhaps just have hubs elsewhere?
For us, the way we look at it is that these politics and these kind of rules will take care of itself. I believe that our country, the fundamentals are very strong. In America, we have the transactional governance, we have rule of law, we have a structure that fosters innovation. So I view this as like a transient phenomena where over time things will take care of itself. When we go international, we do business in like probably 30 odd countries right now. And so far, we have not seen any headwind in our growth or any kind of backlash because of it.
H-1B visa, is that something you've deployed or used?
So we use H-1B visa on case-by-case basis. And obviously, H-1B visa is a challenge because there is a lottery system and very few people can get it. So we take a comprehensive strategy of where we get talent pool from and how we grow the talent pool. And we are cognizant of the restriction around H-1, the number of H-1 applicants available, things like that. But we are thinking about this business as a long-term, self-sustaining business with our sales and marketing around the world. And we are looking at innovation and saying that how do we continue to drive innovation and bring people together on this mission to go change the data management platform for multi-cloud world.
As VCs, with your VC hat on too, Bipul, where excites you the most geographically? Where do you want Khosla Ventures to be keeping an eye on if it's not just Silicon Valley?
Well, outside of Silicon Valley, there's plenty of exciting things going on in like Europe. Israel, India. China, of course, is a whole different beast. We tend not to do a lot in China, but there's interesting technological things happening there.
Why don't you with China?
Just we have a geographic focus, and so we feel we don't understand how to do business in China.
That was Vinod Khosla, founder of Khosla Ventures, and Bipul Sinha, CEO and co-founder of Rubrik. Now, still ahead, we head to Boston, Massachusetts, to a company that sees the future of factories growing from a seed. More on that story next. This is Bloomberg. Ginkgo Bioworks is at the forefront of bringing biology to technology. Based in Boston, the startup is building tools for a future where factories are powered by biology, not traditional manufacturing. Now, the company is currently helping clients design flavors and fragrances by modifying the DNA of microbes like yeast. Bloomberg's Technology's Ellen Hewitt took a trip to Ginkgo Bioworks labs and got a behind-the-scenes look at the company.
A team of PhDs from MIT started Ginkgo Bioworks in Boston, just a few miles away from their alma mater. In inside, they're building tools for a future where factories stop manufacturing goods and start growing them.
At the heart of biology is digital code in the form of DNA. We have now the ability to read that code through DNA sequencing and the ability to write that code with DNA synthesis. And if you can read and write code, you can program. Can you program biology to make stuff? Yes, because DNA is code.
Before they can grow their own iPhones, Ginkgo is focusing on something simpler, reprogramming microbes like yeast to produce artificial flavors and scents. The company is fine-tuning the process in this robot-filled lab.
So this is Bioworks 2. This is our second-generation lab. If you zoom in, it looks like a kind of regular academic lab, but as you zoom out and see all the robotics, that's what we're trying to do here, make things move faster.
Right now, Ginkgo is using genetically modified yeast to create a peach perfume for a client in the fragrance industry. To do that, their researchers first study the part of the peach's genetic code that carries the desired scent. They can then compare that with the yeast DNA and modify it to produce a similar smelling substance. Then the process becomes a lot like brewing beer. The yeast grows and multiplies and produces that peach scent as a byproduct. Ginkgo can extract out that peach scent for clients and give yeast samples a hearty sniff.
Each of these is a different gene combination that's going to make a slightly different smell. So let's see what we got.
Well, it smells a little vinegary, which I think is the yeast.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of fruity smell. Samples that pass the smell test are destined to be inside perfume bottles and the like. But once you really start thinking about it, you can see this technology applying to some pretty unexpected places.
What if this was a microbe that could live directly on your skin? And so on your skin, you're producing your perfume. So you don't need to spritz yourself with perfume. Your microbiome is just producing that scent on its own. A lot of the smells that you might associate with human bodies are actually already coming from microbes. So imagining that those microbes might be a little bit different and make a little bit different smell isn't that hard to believe.
Things are looking good these days for Ginkgo. They recently bought a DNA splicing company and raised $100 million from investors. It's too soon to say if they'll ever make the quantum leap from perfume to grow your own electronics, but Ginkgo sees its gene-modified yeast as the first step toward a factory where biology can make almost anything.
In the future, we could use biology to make a semiconductor chip. If you look into biology, its ability to place atoms is actually superior to Intel's today, right? So if you just knew how to program it, you could do that. The applications for this are sort of endless.
That was Bloomberg Technology's Ellen Hewitt reporting there. Now that does it for this edition of Best of Bloomberg Technology. Next week, we speak with Greg Weiler, CEO of OneWeb, to discuss its new merger with the satellite communications provider Intelsat. Tune in each day, 5 p.m. New York, 2 p.m. right here in San Francisco. Remember, all episodes of Bloomberg Technology are now live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV. That's weekdays. That's all for now. This is Bloomberg.